formerly hopeful adventure to rescue space from the Sakara had ended not in a happy ending, but a depressing one. We had saved her, but lost another in the process. The 9 of us stumbled out of the warehouse, somehow still alive. I limped with help from space, while Andrew and Hunter walked behind us. Quinn carried the body of his sister, refusing help from anyone else. He was struggling to drag her along the ground towards the RV. The night was dark and dreary, the sound of the city echoing throughout the warehouse district. The RV had sustained minimal damage and was sitting outside the warehouse waiting for us. Julia was still inside, having not followed Axel into the fight. She gasped upon the sight of Isabella's body, retreating back inside. One by one, we piled into the RV, tossing our weapons aside and taking our spots. Before I walked in, I looked back at Ryan, who was helping Axel carry the heavy rifle he had taken. I looked at him and asked, "Are you coming?"
Coming? With you guys?
He asked as he followed us out of the building.
We just lost one of our own because of your friends, so get in here before I turn you into one of them.
Andrew threatened him angrily before walking inside. Ignore him. If you want to come with us, you can. If you don't, you're kinda screwed, I told him. He frowned and crossed his arms.
I can take care of myself. The police around here are pushovers.
The police are the least of your worries. Get in and we'll explain.
Madeline told Ryan. He took a few seconds to think before following us into the RV, setting down his shotgun by the door. I closed it behind him, and Andrew started the vehicle, driving away from the warehouse. We were all here, alive, but just barely. I had a bullet wound to the leg, Space had a stab wound to the shoulder, and Spencer had his arm burned by a grenade explosion. My wound was only a graze, but it still hurt. It was like a burning sensation, but instead of a burn, it was a bloody mess. I laid back in my seat, holding Space's hand as I stared out the window. Lights and colors flashed past me as we drove through the city, heading south. I didn't know where we'd stop next, but hopefully it'd be somewhere safe. A few hours later, and we were doing considerably better. As soon as we got into the RV, Quinn had locked himself in the bathroom and left the body of his sister lying in the corner of the RV. Nobody wanted to be disrespectful and move it, but we needed to bury it at some point. Since he was locked away, Ryan took the courtesy to bandage up our wounds. He was pretty good at it too, and told us some of his stories to try and lighten the mood.
Where'd you learn to do this?
Space asked as she rubbed her bandaged shoulder. Ryan was working on my leg and was carefully cleaning it with a cloth.
I lived in that gang for years. It's not rare for a few buddies to show up in the evening with a gunshot wound or two. Usually it was my friend James who took care of that stuff. That is, until he was the one with the bullet wound. I picked up a few things over the years. This is one of them.
He told us. That's really cool, I said, through clenched teeth, the alcohol he was using stinging my leg. He chuckled.
Don't worry, it won't be too much longer.
So why did your group attack us? You guys are kind of a local group in Detroit, right? So why'd you show up in the middle of Indiana?
Madeline asked.
Yeah, that's a messy situation. So a few buddies of ours drove a few states to the west to visit one of their families back home. They moved away a few years ago for a job and joined the gang soon after, but they always made time to go home. But on the way back, some people killed them, and only one of them made it out alive. Called us up, and we went after them. Those people were you.
Ryan explained. The people at Silver Lake. Those were the people Ryan was most likely talking about. They wore the same colors and signs, so they must be the same. We didn't want to do it. They pulled up on us, high on weed, and threatened to kill us. And they're the reason our friend needs a new eye. I told him, trying to clear up any bad air.
Nah, it's fine. I never liked Ramirez anyways.
He said, continuing to work on my wound. Why are you even in their gang? I asked him. He sighed.
When I was 14, my parents died. Huge fire. But I ran out of the house and escaped. I lived on the streets until I came back and saw the place just a pile of ash. A few days later, I was approached by a man. He said he had a few friends in Michigan, and he was just visiting when he saw me. He offered me a place in his group, and I took it. It was sort of like a life debt, but now he's dead, and I'm finally free.
Why didn't you leave earlier?
You try to leave the gang life, you get killed. Simple as that.
He said, tying the bandage he was holding around my ankle. A few minutes later, we came to a stop. Ryan finished bandaging my wound and stood up, all of us watching as Andrew marched out of the driver's seat. We were parked on the side of a dirt road somewhere out in the middle of the country. He looked at us all and asked,
So, what now?
What do you mean, what now?
Madeline asked.
Well, we have no route, no ideas, and a rotting corpse up front. What's the plan?
I stood up and told him, get to Florida as fast as possible. That's all.
Well, it's getting late, and if Quinn won't swap in for me, then we can't go much further. Hunter drove all the way to Detroit, so he's too tired to get up and do anything else. We're gonna have to stop for the night.
He told us.
Where, though?
Space questioned.
There's a farm right on the corner. Hopefully, we can stay the night there.
We all agreed, nodding mutually, before watching Andrew march out of the RV. Space helped me out of the RV, and we all followed, with the exception of Quinn. Andrew pointed towards the body.
Take that thing with us. We need to bury it.
Don't call her an it. She's Quinn's sister.
Space said, shooting him a glare.
She's a rotting corpse that's stinking up the place. Pick it up and drag it behind you if you want.
Seriously. You are so goddamn insensitive. Carry it yourself, asshole.
She shouted at him, stomping up the path and leaving us behind. I sighed, gesturing for Maddie to help me walk. But she was walking with Hunter, the two of them already walking ahead with Spencer trailing behind. Ryan luckily gave me a hand, letting me walk alongside him. Axel and Julia followed beside me, the two kids whispering quietly. Andrew scoffed and grabbed the body, dragging it out of the RV, and struggling to follow behind us. I'd go back and help him, but I couldn't in my condition. As we turned the corner to see the farm, we found an illuminated farmhouse and barn waiting for us. The others had stopped as well, and were staring at it from afar. It was pretty nice. A white 2-story house with a barn not too far away, and a set of stables next to that. The only issue was, the lights in the house were on.
There are already people living here, and I don't think they'd take kindly to us breaking into their house.
Hunter said to Andrew as he caught up. He scoffed.
Kill them? What is wrong with you?
Spencer exclaimed.
We need a place to stay for the night, and outside is no longer safe. Look what happened in that forest. If we're gonna survive the night, we need to get inside.
Andrew shouted at us.
That doesn't mean we need to straight up murder somebody.
Madeline shouted at him.
That's how it is now. We killed mutants, we killed gangbangers. What's the difference? Even these mutants are still people. It's not like they're dead.
He shouted at us. I shouted back. Andrew! You're out of control. We are not killing anybody, and that's that. He glared at me with a deep hatred, before scoffing and walking ahead.
You do what you want. I'm burying her beside the barn.
I glared at him and looked to the others. Let's take the barn. If we're lucky, we can stay the night there for a few hours, and get some well-needed rest. In the morning, we can head out. The others agreed, and we all trudged through the tall grass, heading to the old rickety barn ahead. However, halfway across the field, a thought came to mind. I stopped and whispered to Ryan, "You go ahead. I gotta take care of something." He nodded, before kneeling down, picking up a wooden stick lying in the grass. He handed it to me to use as a walking stick, before running ahead to catch up with the others. I smiled, before reaching down into my pocket, pulling out my cell phone. Just for a split second, I turned my data on. I know it could risk them tracking us, but I needed to see something. I scrolled through my contacts, finding a specific one towards the bottom. I clicked on it. The photo of a girl with short pink hair appearing. Lydia Rose. I had thought about her several times before, but never got a chance to really think deeply about it since this all began. I knew I had feelings for space, but there was just something about Lydia I couldn't drop. I was over her. I knew I'd never be able to hold that much of a long-distance relationship, but I couldn't help but continue thinking about her, and whether or not she was okay. Before this, I had wanted to tell Andrew to head to New York. It was only a few hours from Indiana, and if we had drove all night, we could have gotten there, gotten her, and probably be here at the same time. But no. Instead, the Sakara game kidnapped space, and we spent the entire night driving to Detroit, getting shot up and then driving back here. Slowly, I moved my finger down to the call button and pressed down on the green circle below her name. The phone began to ring, and I moved it up to the side of my ear. Ring after ring, I prayed for her to pick up. I just wanted her to answer, to tell me she was okay. Maybe I could warn her to leave, or maybe she could come after us, just maybe. I waited, and I waited. Ring after ring, I kept my fingers crossed, and just hoped she would pick up. But alas, the phone stopped. My lip began to quiver as I heard the answering machine, and her cutesy voice played from the phone's speakers. I missed talking to her, and we hadn't actually talked in a month.
Hi, this is Lydia. My phone is off or dead right now, so please leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you.
Lydia, The call stopped. Slowly, I moved the phone down, staring at what seemed to be a black screen. It had died. Finally, after all these days, the battery had died. We had no charger, nor would I risk draining the RV's gas to charge the phone. So now, it was just useless. I took a few deep breaths before tossing the phone into the distance, watching as it flew into the grass and disappeared forever. All I wanted to do was talk to her, and that was the one thing I couldn't. The fire crackled brightly, illuminating the otherwise darkened barn. We had all gathered around the small fire Hunter had built before making our own little spots around the barn. Quinn was in the RV, Andrew was digging a grave behind the barn, and Hunter was scoping out the house, while the rest of us sat around the fire, listening. I was looking over all the weapons and pointing out destinations on a map with help from Ryan. We'd explained the situation to him a few hours earlier, and he was now helping us plot a course. Alright, so we need to go south, but I checked the news and these highways are out for construction. Getting through there will be a pain with the traffic, so we gotta take this road and go through the back roads until we get to Bloomington. It's just south of Indianapolis, and from there we can head south into Kentucky, I explained.
Where would we stop? Louisville?
Ryan asked me, pointing out one of the bigger cities. I shook my head. No, that's too out of the way, and too much of a police presence. We need somewhere smaller.
How about Evansville?
Spencer said, pointing at another town. Right over the border. Maybe. Less driving, and maybe we can fuel up at one of the stations nearby, I said, spotting the small town right across the border. Sounds good then, I said, as I folded up the map. We head south to Evansville, fill up the tank once more since Hunter wasn't able to finish the job before, and then we go through Georgia, and finally to Florida. We're over halfway there, and with 3 days to spare.
Well, if you're done, I'm gonna take a nap. My back's been killing me for the past week, so maybe laying on some hay will help.
Ryan said, before lying down on the pile of hay behind him. I shook my head as I grabbed the black duffel bag. Not yet. Let's go through our weapons first. Spencer groaned and whispered to himself.
Great, another cutscene. If only these were skippable.
Spencer, put down the game and help us.
Space said suddenly. He groaned, setting aside his game buddy to pay attention. Now that everyone is paying attention, let's review. Everyone in this group has a handgun and a knife, but we should all have some kind of secondary weapon if we need to. Hunter has a shotgun, and now we got this M4A1, the hunting rifle, and a plain black revolver we got from Detroit. Who wants what? I explained, as I looked over the weapons. Spencer held his hand out instantly.
I'll take the revolver.
We all looked at him, weirdly, and Space asked,
Why do you want that gun? And more importantly, why do you want a gun at all?
What? I can't have a gun?
he asked.
Do you know how to use one?
Spencer nodded.
Yep. You hold it up and pull the trigger.
I face-palmed. Spencer,
Come on! Andrew's always complaining I don't do anything. And I can't do anything if I don't have a gun.
he said, holding out his hand. I begrudgingly placed the plain black revolver in his hand before explaining. All right, 6 shots inside the chamber. Pull the release to open it up and press that thing to release the bullets. And remember, never put your finger on the trigger unless there's an enemy in front of you. He took the gun and smiled, stuffing the gun into his waistband. Despite having heard my explanation, I had a feeling sooner or later he'd end up blowing his balls off. All right, Ryan has his Remington 870, so who wants the M4? I asked everyone. Axel raised his hand from the other side of the campfire.
Me, please?
Axel, you're too young for that.
Space told him.
Hey, I'm already 12, and my dad used to take me to the shooting range, so I know what I'm doing. If it wasn't for me, that guy would have killed you.
He said to us.
I mean, that is true. It wouldn't hurt to give himself something to defend himself with.
Ryan commented.
Please, Anakin, I know it's not a toy or anything.
I sighed and began tapping my finger on the edge of the rifle while thinking. In my experience, giving a kid a heavy machine gun was a horrible idea, but we did need more firepower, especially if the mutant plague was beginning to grow. I sighed and reached into the gun bag, pulling out a small handgun tucked to the side. Axel? Not yet, I said, showing him the gun. You need proper training, and until we take care of that, I can't let you carry a gun. In the morning, if you wake up early, I can teach you a bit. If you can prove to me you're responsible enough to handle a gun, then you can take this. Axel sighed and took the gun.
All right. Pinky promise?
I smiled, wrapping my pinky around his. Axel then sat down beside Julia, lying his head down on her lap, with his hat covering his face.
Are you really gonna give the kid a gun?
Madeline asked me. I shrugged. I mean, if he knows how to use it, why not? Kids younger than him have learned how to shoot, and we need all the help we can get. It's not like I'm putting him in the line of fire or anything. He shouldn't use it unless he has to. She sighed and got up, walking off.
Sometimes you are really irresponsible.
Where are you going? I asked.
I'm gonna go check on Hunter.
She said, walking out of the barn to find them. Spencer frowned, resting his head on the stuffed bee plush she had left behind. He didn't like being left alone. All right, with the map and the weapons out of the way, now we just need to figure out what to do with Quinn, I said as I stared out towards the RV.
Quinn's Quinn. What are you gonna do?
Space said. Well, we can't just leave him be, I said. Well, I can't tell what he is. Depressed, sad.
He's always depressed.
Spencer commented. Okay, look, the point is, he just lost his sister. He doesn't know how to express his emotions. He feels emotionally lost. I don't want him to do anything dumb because of that.
Well, I'm not talking to him. Him and Andrew are on their man period.
Space said. I sighed, getting up and holstering my revolver. The others didn't stop me, allowing me to walk out of the barn and over to the RV across the field. As I walked across the dirt path, I took a few seconds to admire the night sky. I made my way to the RV to see all the lights off, as I expected. I walked up to the steps and opened the door, looking around to see Quinn, standing in the midst of the RV, his back to me, with a knife in one of his hands. "Quinn, don't do what I think you're doing," I said to him calmly, one hand instinctively moving down to my revolver.
"And what is it you think I am doing?"
Quinn said, turning around to reveal an orange in his hand. "Oh, sorry, I thought you were..."
"Self-harming? Oh, heavens, no. I would never throw my life away for something as useless as cutting myself. All it does is scar the worthless vessel that contains the most brilliant mind known to mankind,"
he said, feeling the orange with his knife. "Most brilliant mind known to mankind? Then why are you still in high school?" I asked.
"Did you come here to mock me, or make a half-assed attempt at getting me to open up?"
he said. I opened my mouth to answer, but he spoke first.
"I thought so. Ancestral. Always trying to unite us all. But you can't."
"What are you saying?"
"Like Space said the other night, you have the natural ability to be a leader, but you are unsure of yourself. You always take others' input rather than going with your own, and not always because you care about their opinion, but because they would carry the burden of failure as well,"
he explained to me. I shot a glare at him. "What are you saying?"
"I'm saying that you, like every human out there, has flaws. And I will admit, as do I. I apologize for what I told you at the gas station. I have not realized it till recently, but I miss him. Luis. He was always a very pleasant fellow, even if his English was a bit off. He was brave, too. And now, he is dead,"
Quinn said, crossing his arms.
"And then Isabella. If we had not gone back to safe space, she would be alive. And no offense, but I put priority in my own flesh and blood rather than her. I said her blood would be on your hands if she died. But it was I who she died to save."
They may be gone, but we're not. We can keep carrying on, for both of them.
"Yes, that is true. I just do not know whether or not to carry on with or without the lot of you,"
he muttered, as he began cutting up his orange. "Without us?" I asked.
"You people seem to treat my genius as more of a burden than a blessing,"
Quinn told me. I shook my head. "Quinn, your genius isn't what's gotten us this far. You being smart isn't the problem. It's that sometimes you act like an ass and you don't realize it. You treat emotions like it's a weakness, but it's what makes us strong. It's what makes us human."
"Humanity is a mistake, Anakin. All of what has happened to us so far is because of humanity. Humans are selfish, weak, and destructive. Savages. If you would please, I'd like to be alone,"
he said, sitting down. I nodded to him before exiting the RV, leaving him to eat his orange slices. I walked back across the field, spotting Spencer approaching Andrew outside the barn. "Oh no," I muttered to myself, hoping a fight wasn't about to break out. Spencer walked around the barn, spotting Andrew attempting to dig a grave. He was holding a heavy shovel, piling dirt beside him as he tried to dig it deep enough to cover her in. Spencer approached him awkwardly, intimidated by his angered expression.
Hey, do you need
Piss
any...
off.
Okay then. Well, I just wanted to know if you needed any help digging or anything.
Please. You couldn't dig into a molehill without hurting your back.
Can so!
Spencer then kicked a nearby molehill, knocking several ants over. However, he almost tripped, just barely managing to catch his balance to avoid falling in the mud. Andrew scoffed and went back to shoveling.
Just hand me a shovel.
Spencer told him, getting a bit fed up with his pissy attitude.
Suit yourself.
Andrew said, grabbing a second shovel laying in the grass and tossing it to him. Spencer caught it and walked past the body, beginning to dig into the grave. It was hard at first, but after a few scoops he was able to get the hang of it. I smiled at the two as they dug the grave, before stepping into the barn, ready to close my eyes and finally go to sleep. I hadn't gotten a chance to sit down and really relax since the sleepless night we had in the cabin, so my body was begging for rest. But as I stepped towards the set of blankets I had laid out in the barn, I found Space, sitting beside them on her own blanket she had laid out beside mine. I frowned, stopping in front of her as she turned around and looked at me. Judging by her expression, I could tell only one thing. "It's a trap!" Admiral Agbar's words echoed through my mind as she stood up, looking at me with a faint smile.
Hey, I was hoping I'd get a chance to talk to you real quick, before we all went to bed. Is that okay?
She asked. I nodded to her. Yeah, it's fine. What's up?
Okay. So I just wanted to say, thank you, Annie. Honestly, thank you so much. Spencer told me what happened between you and Quinn, how you're the reason you guys came to find me.
I smiled. Well, yeah. I care about you, Sarah, and I couldn't just leave you behind.
I know. When I was in that warehouse, they tied me up and told me I'd never see you guys again. But I told them you would come for me. Of all people to save me, I'm happy it was you.
She said as she stepped forward, grabbing my hand. I'm just glad you're safe.
Anyways, I just wanted to say that I really like you, Annie. Like, honestly, you make me feel safe, and you're the only reason I'm here now. So I just wanted to ask, do you, wanna be with me?
Be with you? What do you mean? I asked, my heart racing.
Like a boyfriend and girlfriend. A couple? Do you want to be, together?
I immediately nodded, and a faint tear appeared in the corner of her eyes. She pulled me into a hug, laughing as she faintly cried into my chest.
Thank you, Annie.
She whispered as she hugged me. Anything for you, Spacey. I whispered to her as I hugged her back, staring up at the moon as I did so.